Next thing you know, a V-2 rocket goes off course and hits a place in Mexico.
No way.
Yeah. And the von Braun's people basically intimated to the Americans, if you make working conditions hard for us and keep grilling us like this, rockets are bound to go off course, and maybe, a war with Mexico might even start.
Okay? What?
So they were being hassled by these people in a way that suggests that these Nazis had a lot more control and latitude than the civilian government of the United States wanted to believe was the case. And I think that degree of control is coming from the deep state that was established through the National Security Act of 1947. In other words, the CIA, probably the NSA, and various other apparatuses of our deep state in America were co-constituted by the remnants of the SS. And this isn't unique to America with, like for example, the absorption of the Galen network into the OSS to create the CIA. It's also the case with the British. So Ian Fleming, who went on to write the Bond novels, was an MI6 operative whose specific mission at the end of the war was to facilitate the evacuation of Martin Bormann to Argentina. Martin Bormann was like the financial mastermind of the Reich. And he supposedly died 3 times. There are 3 conflicting accounts of this man's death from 1945 to 47. Next thing you know, he has a joint bank account with Juan Perón in Argentina. And as late as the 1960s, Martin Bormann is cashing checks written in his own name through JP Morgan Chase in Buenos Aires. Okay? So the British are involved too. And then this Ian Fleming, MI6, operative, winds up becoming a novelist who writes about an organization called Spectre, which is a hidden third power in the world. So the villain in the Bond verse, right, is a secret, transnational, global organization that's capable of rivaling both the Soviet Union and the civilian government of the United States.
Whoa. Well, I guess Spectre, they have like German accents, a lot of them, don't they? Or
it's like very obviously the organization which was known to Ian Fleming as Odessa, the initials of which in German stand for Order of Former SS Officers, and which informally was referred to as Die Spinne, or the Spider.
Fascinating. Really? Well, that's really amazing. That's so interesting. And do you know anything? Because I believe the inspiration for Ian Fleming for James Bond was William Stevenson, who is known as Churchill's super spy. He was a sort of Canadian-British, actually, and I had an eidetic memory, was an engineer, and then also was this kind of brilliant super spy strategist. And so was he ever fighting the Spider in any sort of way? Because that would like instantiate this even more.
Yeah, that I don't know.
Yeah.
That I don't know. But I know that Fleming was involved with them and facilitating. I think that the leadership of this organization basically was taken over by Martin Bormann. And probably Otto Skorzeny was in the second position once these people basically set up shop in Argentina. One of the most interesting things that they did in Argentina was they promised they were going to develop fusion power and fusion nuclear weapons for Juan Perón. And this guy, Ronald Richter, German scientist, set up a fusion project in Bariloche. This is early 1950s, late 40s into the early 50s. I believe in 1951, the Atomic Energy Agent, the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, went down there to investigate claims that they were developing nuclear fusion. And they found a very, complex facility over there.
Yeah, I've been there, actually. I've seen it.
Yeah,
so
you were telling me.
There's a little island off the coast of Bariloche. It's like this little,
So you went to Bariloche to investigate?
Not to investigate this.
I was just
chilling hanging out in Bariloche,
Oh.
and I was on a hike, and then somebody told me about this scientist named Ronald Richter, who was this former Nazi who was working on fusion there, and I was like, what? And then I went, and it's amazing. And so, yeah. And then there's a civilian nuclear grid in Bariloche as well. So who knows if there is some sort of overlap there.
Well, Argentina later almost developed nuclear weapons later on in the 1970s. But here's the interesting thing, is that he promised to develop these nuclear fusion weapons for Perón, and he never did, Ronald Richter. And moreover, when the IAEA people went down there and investigated, they said, this doesn't look like any fusion that we understand. We don't know what this guy's doing down here. It's incredibly energy intensive, but it doesn't look like any kind of fusion that we understand. Okay. Here's where it gets really dark and goes to your question of like, if they had all this technology, meaning the Nazis, why didn't they use it to win the war? And how is it that we won the war? And so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
Okay. There are some eyewitness reports of 2 German nuclear weapons tests being conducted between late 1944 and early 1945. One in the Baltic Sea, where a pilot was flying over the Baltic Sea, and he saw an bright light that almost blinded him, and an explosion where there were like multi-colored, like rainbow-colored lights, like fizzling inside the explosion, which is a telltale sign of a nuclear fission explosion when you see one with your naked eye in person. It doesn't register on camera very well, but it's like the rest of the fissile material kind of like reacting inside the mushroom cloud. And he said like it created a huge pressure wave he saw from his airplane, and this blinding flash of light and these weird like multicolored reactions. And then there's a second eyewitness account of what appears to be a nuclear test near the Thuringian forest, which I think they said like cut out power in a nearby town or something like this. Like, you know, the EMP effect of a nuke. So again, this is research that's been done by 2 people. One is a guy, weird name, Plimpton Heydrich, I think.
Plymouth. Or is it Plimpton?
I got it wrong when we spoke on the phone.
It's
actually Plimpton, I think, Heydrich.
Okay.
A book called Critical Mass.
Okay.
It's a whole study of the Nazi nuclear program and its connection to the United States and to the bombs we dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which we'll come to in a minute. And then the second source is Farrell's deeper research on Plimpton Heydrich's claims and additional research that he did into Nazi nuclear weapons. And basically, the picture that emerges is this: that the uranium enrichment program that Heisenberg was running was a red herring. That it was a basically cover and diversionary tactic to throw off the Allies, who successfully defeated that program. They sent like a team of like Nordic skiers or something to like take out the heavy water plant, and so they derailed that project. But that there was a deeper black project to develop nuclear weapons using electromagnetic isotope separation, which is something that later was used at Oak Ridge in the United States. And that the Germans were using electromagnetic isotope separation in a more secret parallel track program that did succeed in developing fission weapons. Now, Plimpton Heydrich in his book argues, he makes this case, that at Trinity, they did not, the records showed that they did.
When you say electromagnetic isotope separations, like just like a centrifuge or like?
No, something other than the kind of centrifuge technology that we're used to. And I'm not a physicist. I don't know what it is. Sure. And probably they were also using laser isotope enrichment because the Nazis developed the laser, I think, in part for the purpose of isotope enrichment. And which, by the way, just very brief side note to all those people like investigating the Iranian nuclear program right now, they are not using centrifuge enrichment for the nuclear weapons. Iran has been using laser isotope enrichment. And I hope that wherever the hell it is they're conducting laser isotope enrichment, that this regime doesn't have an unacknowledged stockpile of highly enriched uranium. In any case, be that as it may as a side note, the Shah bought laser isotope enrichment technology from Switzerland in 1970.
Interesting.
Anyway, so all this does talk about, we got to check out the centrifuges. It's not where they're doing.
Yeah.
But, okay, how is it relevant? They learned from the Nazis. The Nazis had a fake program, which was a diversionary tactic, and then there was a real deeper black program.
Why would you use, because Heisenberg was so smart. I mean, he was responsible for, understanding the mathematical underpinnings behind quantum leaps, electrons and electron shells and orbits and, the uncertainty principle.
He also wrote this book, Physics and Philosophy, which is an absolutely masterful text.
Yeah, it's
that
beautiful
quotes
book.
Heraclitus and shows how Heraclitus was like a precursor to quantum theory and intuited basically quantum theory. It's a fantastic book. Brilliant guy.
Yeah, and it's a trippy book, that book, because he talks about all sorts of issues in quantum mechanics and interpretations that, the Copenhagen school is kind of wrestling with, that we now kind of paint over with this broad brush around consciousness. And he really muses in this deep way that consciousness might play a part in wave function collapse and that sort of thing. And now it's just, it's the quantum detector or whatever does, the wave function collapse is when particles collide or whatever. But
so why would you waste a guy like that,
a brain like that?
Because if you want the Allies to believe that this is your nuclear program, you're going to have to put as your front man the guy that the Allies would expect to be running the Nazi nuclear program.
What's interesting about him is he and all the people on his nuclear program were captured, like you said, and they were put, I believe, in the English countryside, and the whole house was wiretapped. And this was a part of the ALSOS program, this, nuclear tech retrieval program. And they were just listening, what are they going to say? Maybe they, give away some trade secrets. And they talk about feeling regret around working on the nuclear program, and also gratitude that their sort of heavy water engine never quite worked out, which was, I guess they were using deuterium, in their approach. So
I thought you were going to say something else, because the other thing I've heard about that, I've heard this story.
Yeah. There's a transcript. It's amazing.
Yeah,
read it online.
But here's another interesting thing about that. Is that when the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they overheard these guys. They have that, transcript of how immediately Heisenberg and his people calculated the amount of fissile material used.
Really?
Yeah. So it was as if they knew, like they could reverse engineer from, the scale of the explosion, whatever, what kind of bomb produced.
Whoa.
Which implies a completed nuclear weapon. Or knowledge of one. But in any case, that's not important.
Either that or they're the most competent guys, which means they shouldn't be on the cover program.
I wouldn't rest anything on that. But here's the interesting point I was making in relation to the Plimpton Heydrich's research.
Yeah.
Is that he says that there's records showing the amount of fissile material at Trinity, and that it wasn't anywhere close to being able to basically complete Fat Man and Little Boy. And that in 1945, a deal was made with the Nazis.
Different parts of the brain have different activities.